Cool. I always start my talks by saying that if the talk is more difficult than the pronunciation of my name, I'll return your money. So my name is actually pronounced as 5 syllables. It's Thudiyanplackal, so in case anyone wants to know that. But today's talk is really about AI and virtual production. So these are two things that have really gained a lot of recognition in the last couple of years, a lot of momentum. And how do we really use these to augment our ability to tell stories, intelligent stories, in a creative way? So that's something that I want to explore today. And everybody's, of course, heard a lot about ChatGPT in these past few months and Midjourney, and it's something that we get to scroll endlessly on LinkedIn and other social media platforms, people experimenting and just putting out, what they're creating. And as a result, what's happening is with more users, the AI is also getting better. And the AI is an easy term that is caught on, artificial intelligence, but for me, I believe the intelligence is really a human intelligence that we're transferring to the AI, and we should never forget that. And for me, it's always machine learning. It's learning from us, so we have to retain our intelligence, we have to retain what we wish to achieve, our path with certain tools, goals for our creative outcomes. And that's something that we're transferring over to these models. And each model is, of course, designed for specific purposes. And for example, right now with ETC, we did a project called Fathead, which was an exploration of virtual production. And the next project probably look at how to bring in machine learning AI tools for specific tasks within the virtual production pipeline. Even at this event, you'll see a number of tools which have been created with some amount of AI in there. One of the tools we did use on Fathead was called Move.ai. This is something that was used for motion capture or performance capture on a stage with actors, but not using a suit or markers. And this was very important for us when we were working on it, because we were working with children in the middle of a pandemic, and we didn't want them to exchange suits, we didn't want to have that cumbersome experience. And the idea is just to have a number of cameras capture data, give it to the machine learning platform, and what it really does is basically just look at for the joints of the biped human and tracks it from there, the movement of those joints, and then builds the bone data and then the overall skeletal movement data. And that's, again, machine learning. It's a lot of training data that goes into it. But what we noticed was also the processing that goes behind it. So for just 1 minute of footage, we were taking about 5 hours of data processing to get the skeletal data to us. So those are things we need to be very aware of. While tools like ChatGPT, Midjourney, all of these things are being made free to us today, soon they won't be free. So we don't want to be too addicted to them or too dependent on them. We have to be careful of how much processing we use and where and how we use it. So we'll do something experimental right now, which is we'll take some prompts. We'll start with some prompts that I'll give her in ChatGPT, and then from there we'll actually take some prompts from you as well. So let's try asking ChatGPT. We have to have some nature of exactitude in there. We can't be very abstract. So let's ask it to basically inform us about a certain character that we can build. So let's look for, can you provide us the profile for a detective who works for the FBI and is mid-level in seniority? What are the tasks such a detective would be assigned with? So it's starting to give us kind of a profile of a character who would be in that particular role within the FBI. And as it would say, if you go into its disclaimer with ChatGPT, it would say its training data is, probably a year old, or up until 2021, I think, is when it was trained. So the thing with training data is you always have to keep updating it to make it current. So it would give us a lot of, so it's almost like a Google search, but more, with more accuracy that you could build into it with the kind of prompts you create. And the idea of the way that we communicate with these different AI systems are through prompts, and each different system will have a different kind of prompt engineering that is needed for it. So now let's write a scene in which Agent John Doe has figured out something his colleagues don't know. It's a tip that leads to a group planning the president's assassination. That leads to, so instead of needs to. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Agent Joe is with his colleagues in a meeting and decides to share this information by breaking rank. Write this into a screenplay format scene. Cool, that's good. And as you can see, it starts to build that scene out and break it up. Now it's able to do some of these things pretty well. And the thing is, there's still a certain degree of accuracy that's missing. And these are the places where you cannot wholly depend on it. You still need to have your basic knowledge in whatever area that you want to use an AI in. So you need to know how good screenplays are built, what good dramatic structure is, what good plots are, how to build good information that makes a character interesting to the audience. So those are things, there are no shortcuts for those. So you do need to do the legwork, the hard work that brings you the knowledge and the know-how that makes you an expert in communicating an idea, communicating an emotion to the audience. But you could get it to do the legwork. So now I can say, okay, instead of the FBI, why not have this happen in London, and he's an agent in the secret agency in London, so rewrite it for London. So it would do those kind of things. But the legwork, which is basically what is the character doing, what's the scenario in which the drama is created, what's that conflict in that character's journey, those are things that you're weaving into the story. That's not something that's going to come from the AI software, right? So these are things that you do need to go and, I would say, learn from masters who have either talked about it, written about it, observed their work, watch a lot of movies, go work with somebody as an assistant on their sets, and those kind of things. There are no shortcuts for those. That's always going to be the case. The same thing goes for art. You may not know how to draw for yourself or storyboard or create 3D models. So those are things where it becomes very easy now when you want to convert this into a concept art. You would take this into Midjourney, and then now you would basically try to convert that into, say, for example, a storyboard or a concept art for it. Or you would say, hey, let's create a poster about this thing. And you can work from scratch, meaning you're just giving it word prompts, or you can even start with something which is like a visual representation. So you'd find some kinds of visuals that seem to match the kind of tonality you want, the kind of visual imagery you want, and you can build your own training sets and start to train certain forms of generative AI. In the case of Midjourney, at this point, I believe there's only one image that you can give it, and it's able to take, say, for example, the face of a person and put them into different scenarios and things like that. There's Runway, in which you're able to do things like outpainting. There's also DALL-E in which you can do that. So you just have an image that basically cuts off over here, and you could start building an outpainting and say, okay, let's extend that room, or you could basically just select certain areas and say, I don't like that particular armchair over there. Let's try to replace it with something different. So these are things that are happening right now, and that's where AI shines, in my view, especially within the creative space. The other thing I also note is that with creatives, we get very, I'd say, trapped in our own bubble sometimes, as if we believe all these tools are just being created for us. The reality of it for me is that we are driven people. Creative people are very driven. We'll stay up nights. We'll stay up nights at length for weeks. If we have a deadline and we want to basically send our film to the festival or something like that. And that's a very good, attractive thing, I think, for a lot of model testers. So when they release a tool for us, I think we put in more hours in testing something. We also get very creative with the kind of prompts we write, with the kind of problems that we present to these AI tools. And that's very interesting, I think, to our counterparts in the technology field. But most of these tools are really being engineered for far more mission-critical functions in society, I believe. A lot of these get used in farming, in areas that we don't even think of. This gets in bioengineering. A lot of cancer treatments are being now expedited because of the role of AI in it. And much of it comes from a lot of this kind of training data that goes in it. But it creates certain models, and then you kind of are able to take that model and just change its framework for a different industry. So there's something called Pluralsight, which you could look up, which is something that was created for industry where you could apply it within a factory, for example, and it's able to look at a production line where a ton of manufacturing is happening, and you could give it how to identify whether a product meets, grade A, grade B, grade C, whatever, and it's able to get those visual parameters and pretty much at light speed calculate those things and give those numbers and metrics to the people in the shop floor. Farmers are using it where it can just count a bunch of sheep, but there are certain anomalies that will occur once in a while, where say if there's a cow standing on one side of a building, the front of it sticking over here, and there's another cow standing on the other side of the building with just the back of it sticking, it could just count it as one cow, one very long cow. So those errors have to be tracked again by a human, and all along it's an assistive AI, so there always has to be some human supervision who's always training it to get it to the next level. A lot of input that comes from the user or the final end user experience in whatever industry it is. And in our own experience, when we start working with these tools, we kind of start getting approximations. So with all of these tools, especially in creative, it starts with approximations, and then you have to keep massaging it to get to a certain level. Sometimes, especially with virtual production, where so much of it is about pre-planning, you cannot arrive on the day on a virtual production set, something like this. This is actually a virtual production set, right, with an LED wall, all prepped for that. We could be shooting an entire scene here, but I couldn't request for something on the wall that we hadn't already planned, built, tested in pre, right? So we call it fix it in pre. We have to fix it in pre. Build all the options that we think we're going to use. So for example, if we started out with a scene that was written at like this looks like a midday scene, and I wanted it to be a scene that was set in the dead of the night, and it was basically a secret meeting, not taking place in an official environment, but in some kind of a secretive hideout, then you kind of give those details. So in the case of an AI, it's able to wing that pretty quickly. But in the case of virtual production, you cannot wing that easily. So you have to prep these kind of variations that you think that might be good on the day with these kind of tools that are able to very easily give you variations and give you an idea of what that's going to look like. And then you basically pass it down the line where more expensive tools, more expensive resources are going to get involved. So in this case, for example, when we look at, I always say start out with pencil and paper, start out with storyboarding. Same thing goes for writing. I mean, it's the cheapest resource. So experiment with the text as much as you want, then experiment with the line on the page, which is your storyboards, then go into images like this, and then from there build into something more serious, which would be you have to build out your environments, which are 3D environments with, you know, the lighting environment built into it, all of those things, 3D assets, hero assets. Now those things are becoming very easy, where the AI is able to pop some easy 3D models, for example. The meshes are there, but then you'd have to go in there and probably make it more to your taste. So to me, it speeds up a lot of things, which is great. And depending on how much you're able to invest into it in terms of the training data, into the training models, into how you build it into your own creative pipeline, you can milk it that much better. So yeah, so we'll see what the next result looks like. So I'll read out some of the prompts over here, and you can see the results that are coming out. A night in a dark alley, and the agent finds a tip to planning an assassination of the president in London in the style of Guy Ritchie, Unreal 4K variations. So it gives us 4 variations, and it also gives an option that you could click one of them. When you like something, you can then up-res it and stuff like that. So it's a good iterative tool, in my view, at this time. And as we go along through the generations of these AI upgrades, things will get better. And it only comes from input from specific things. There are also models that like OpenAI is an entire environment. Like it's a tool set which NLP and a number of other tool sets in there, and you're able to basically use that pre-built systems and then engineer your own tool for your own specific purpose. So there are certain levels of figuring out where we fit into it. Do we want to be, yeah, so this is the up-resed image of that. So you could build an entire poster out of it. It could even do a mock poster if we said suggest title. You know, if we go back to ChatGPT and say suggest some titles for a spy mystery thriller set in London, and it could give us some titles or whatever, and then we come and create different variations of the concept art and the posters and whatnot. So great for those initial sessions, I believe. And as we go deeper into it, then we are going to need some very specific tools. And I'm listening to folks in the industry that I know very well in the VFX business who feel very threatened by some of these things. There's some new tools coming out. There's Wonder Labs. I don't know if you've seen those things that have come out. So you can basically just have a live action shot of an actor walking in a scene or doing whatever, and you can provide it a 3D character, a rigged character built for that system, and it would replace the physical actor with a 3D model pretty much within that environment. So it's doing a number of things over there. It's basically collecting. So here are some of the titles that are suggested for a spy thriller set in London. London Patrol, The Spy Ring. So it gets creative in its own way. And like I said, it's only as intelligent as the base source material from which it's learning whatever it's learning. Could we go to wonderlabs.ai.com, I think it's called? Yeah. Yeah, I'll do a Q&A, yeah. Cool. So in the interest of time, I'll take some questions.
Is there any fear with censorship with the AI? Though, as we say, it's learning, right? So is there any fear of censorship through individuals saying, hey, do not play these things, don't have these images on purpose? Is there any fear of that through AI?
So, I mean, that's obviously one of the ethics questions that's been floating around, especially in the artist industry, because a lot of the training data that got used in some of the early versions of these models were pretty much as, you know, it was free for all. They took anything that was accessible to them on the internet and stuff like that. So those things are in great discussion right now. So companies like Shutterstock, Getty Images, they're actually building these whole library licensing models where you're using their libraries for training data in a very specific way, and the pricing models of that and everything will get worked out iteratively as we go along. But those discussions have been heard very clearly in a resounding manner, and people are taking steps to contain it in a specific way. Studios especially have been very careful about it because they don't want to risk those things. So when they want to experiment with AI in their pipeline, they're being very specific. So rather than using this very general tool which applies to an entire project or an IP, they're more interested in something very specific where, let's use an AI that generates quick, 3D meshes, simple 3D meshes to build 3D environments, or something that's able to do very specific tasks within a frame, like, for example, deepfake, right? So in the case of the new Indiana Jones movie that's coming, there's a ton of de-aging that's happened with Harrison Ford's character. So that's a very specific thing that they've done, but they use their own training data because Lucasfilms had done so much work with them, and they had all that training data from that age that needed. So it all comes down to that baseline training data to protect IP and to be safe.
Looking into your near-term crystal ball, what are you most excited about for virtual production and generative AI, ChatGPT style integration over the next, let's say, year?
So, like I mentioned earlier, this is all about fix it and prep. Virtual production is all prep. You have to prepare a lot to get to the stage. So that preparatory phase usually would take a long time, right? So a lot of people heard the early advertising around virtual production, got very excited, where some of the material out there was saying, what, the flip of a button, we could be at, in Aruba, or in the morning, in the afternoon, we could be in Paris doing a night sequence, and you could have sun, like all these different scenes. And then directors would show up on the day and request for all these different variations, which wasn't discussed prior, right? And it never was there, and they would get disappointed, like, I didn't get what I was told I'd get. But that's not the thing. So the preparatory phase also became very challenging for some people, where it's like you have to prepare for like 4 months before you get 3 days of joy. And that preparatory phase can basically, the timeline can be saved quite a bit, and a lot of costs that go into it. So your iterative process is sped up very much in this with the use of AI.
Thanks, Tom. I can open it up to other questions, but I just wanted to comment really quick. So as a director and somebody that uses AI right now to create characters, to previs, to pitch to development, to get producers on board to understand the scope and the vision of my screenplay or my characters, it's been a really important tool for me. I write fairy tales. I create characters that don't actually even exist yet. So this has been just another tool to like communicate with all of the departments and the stakeholders and the people with money. Like, what is it you're really investing in? What is it that you're really coming on board with? So it's been a tool of alignment on my end. Yeah. More questions?
Hello. I wanted to ask you about content security. So studios, as you know, don't like to share content on public servers, and visual effects houses are very particular. If it comes to content security, do you think about offline versions or something?
Yeah. So when studios look into these models, yes, they are going to build it within their infrastructure. It's either going to be on-prem or edge systems within which they'll build their own training data and models. And that's why the adoption is slow at that level. So those are things in discussion, and one of the things with ETC is the board of directors on ETC's board are all the CTOs of the major studios, and the reason we want to explore this in our next production pipeline is essentially for that. Is like they would only want to make that like it's a very systemic thing for them. So when they say yes to something, they have to test it somewhere before they bring it into their infrastructure. It moves quite a lot of pieces for them.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thank you. Keep exploring, have fun with these tools, and be safe while doing it. Don't give up on your intelligence or your imagination. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tom.